In this part, I'm gonna compare Dynamo and Grasshopper and say which is better or more functional. First of all, I should say that each of them has its own capabilities in a way that we can just specify one of them as the better application from the other one. And this is a kind of shallow mindset to compare them in this way. You know what I'm saying? It's a kind of underestimation, which is not professional. So let me say that Grasshopper is wonderful, but it's used for creating meshes, which is built in Rhino, and this means that it is not functional in Revit, and we can't use it, you know. However, in the latest versions, a version have been added named Rhino. Let me search in the Google. Rhino inside Revit log, which has been released recently. But the fact is that it doesn't have the capabilities of Dynamo. It's just used for concepts and creating meshes. So here, as you can see, you can run the Rhino and Grasshopper inside such applications like Revit, and then in which you can transfer some concepts and meshes between Rhino and Revit. And you know, it became easier, and the version you need to install it here, as you can see, requires Rhino WIP, because the ordinary Rhino is not supported here. Anyway, I want to close this. You can read about Rhino if you want in the website or download it. Right now, one of the weak points of the Grasshopper in Revit is, I want to consider it in Revit, not in Rhino, because a Grasshopper in Rhino is wonderful. So as I said before, practically in Grasshopper you are working on the masses. For example, here you can't get the information of the elements in Revit by Grasshopper and then give them back in Revit, because Grasshopper is only defined in Rhino, not Revit. But unlike Grasshopper in Dynamo, you can just design very complicated meshes. You got also access to the parameters and information of an element in Revit with the Dynamo. As you can see, you got access to all of these, even the parameters which not exist in the Dynamo, in Revit, in a way that you got access to all of the hide and show informations. So because of these, I recommend those who work with Revit to learn the Dynamo, not Grasshopper. But if they are working with Rhino, Grasshopper would be great for them. But here in this way, I recommend them the Dynamo. So in Revit, the first priority is Dynamo. So again, you may ask from yourself which is better, Grasshopper or Dynamo. I wanna tell you again. At first, you should specify the application which you are working with. For example, Revit or Rhino. So, if you are working with Rhino, I recommend you Grasshopper, but if you are working with Revit, I recommend you Dynamo. And we cannot compare them that in a way that which is better, because we cannot use Revit and Rhino and transfer the file between them simultaneously, because this is a kind of nonsense thing and almost impossible to export it. And here I want to give you another example. You may have asked from yourself that which programming application I should use. For example, that Dynamo, VB.NET, C#, Python, or for example, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna ask your question by giving another example. Revit supports the language programming of Ruby, VB.NET, C#, and Python. But I recommend you, if you are a newcomer to programming, to start from Dynamo. Because as I said before, the Dynamo is a kind of visual programming language which does not involve you in writing codes and scripts and programming, with which you can have interaction without knowing any programming language. So if you don't know the programming language, you cannot write any scripts and codes. And the process of learning programming takes a long time actually. For example, suppose that if you wanna write a functional program in Revit, you need to practice for a year and many hours per day, which it takes so much time, and then you can do programming. But in Dynamo everything is different. For example, you can do this just in a month. And another point is that if you learn the Dynamo, it will help you to learn other programming application, for example Python, C#, in a way that you understand most of the construction of the programming. So let's give you an example. I open Visual Studio to give you an example to say the differences between visual programming and writing a script. For example, here I'm gonna create a list containing even and odd number and then isolate them from each other. And I'm gonna do this with C#. And mine is the latest version, 2019. Here, create new project. And then after that, here in recent project templates, class library, these are the projects which I have been used recently. Or I can also search in my old projects, for example C#. Here it is, class library, net framework. Then I click on next. Then here I can consider a name for my project. For example, I specified evens odds. Let me just edit it. And then I should specify the location, the path for saving the files. So I paste the path and then I make a new folder. Then here I make a new folder and then name it evens odds for the location for files. And another point is that as I'm using the latest version of the Revit, I'm in 2021, here you need to choose Net Framework 4.8. But if it did not exist here, you need to download it yourself. For example, let me search for it. .NET Framework 4.8. Just wait for a second, I'm just downloading it in this way, so just check this out. Or just 2.8. For example, download. Then here I open the website to download the Net Framework. So install it and then VB.NET 2.8 would be installed too in your Visual Studio. But as you can see, I have it because I have installed it before and then I create it, and I will continue this video in next video.